Hello everyone, and welcome to Bucket List Gamer, the channel where I go through the list of games from my past that I never had the chance to play, finish, or gain access to for whatever reason, and play them from start to finish. Episode 1, The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. On a stormy fall day in 1997, my dad brought a tattered cardboard box home. In this dilapidated unmarked parcel was a Super Nintendo Entertainment System and a handful of games. I dove into The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past with a gusto that I could only experience when I was 10. I had never played anything like this. The ability to set foot out of a character's door and go, well, anywhere, was not something I had experienced. I had an N64 and I had played Mario 64 and Shadows of the Empire, but I had never played a game with the level of open-world freedom that was offered by Link to the Past. It didn't take long for me to get bored. I died a lot. I didn't know where to go. I was completely unaccustomed to playing games like this, and there wasn't much room in my little life for an appreciation of them. I shelved it. Months passed. Months turned into years. Years turned into decades. And always nagging at the back of my mind was the unfinished world of Link to the Past. This made it an appropriate first entry on the bucket list. For the list, I started back as far as I could remember with games that I had played, felt unfinished, or had never had the chance to play for whatever reason. As I jumped into the land of Hyrule and into the shoes of an adolescent, or maybe preteen, or maybe young adult Link, I found the gameplay enjoyable enough. Who am I kidding? I freaking loved it. I found it addicting. If I died, I wanted to pick myself up and start right back where I was. I like the little animated sprite-based combat a lot. There were so many creative little implementations of puzzles. They were subtle, usually too subtle, but I'll come back to that. The way the devs created this resulted in an experience that was complex and challenging. Maybe too challenging. Okay, I'll stop that. Now, let's start with what I liked about this game. The combat is inventive and fun. It challenged me, and when I ran into something I couldn't contend with, I obsessed over how I was going to solve the issue. Several of the boss battles were great fun, and I would probably play a game that was just Link fighting bosses from this game. I had my moments of frustration, but it was never enough to make me want to quit. The game looks great. It is a 16-bit game through and through, but the graphical fluidity is remarkable. The aesthetics are thematically consistent, and I liked the stylized shift between the two worlds. Spoiler alert, there are two mirror worlds that Link jumps in between. I love the aesthetic of the light world. There is something cozy and interesting about just wandering around that world and hacking down bushes and fighting enemies. Seriously, I could have wandered and slashed at bushes and engaged with random enemies just to chill. However, something about that felt kinda hollow at the same time. I'll come back to that though. Finally, there are some really cool mechanics in this game. You can run into objects to knock things off of them. There are times when the player will have to drain swamps or fill channels with water. You can even summon a little Pidgeotto guy to fly you around the world. The item upgrades and constant grind to replenish resources kept me coming back for more. Also, the Book of Eudora to translate ancient forgotten monuments? I mean, come on, there's no way I'm not gonna love that. There are a lot of little things I liked about this game, but I don't know if they're relevant for the purposes of this video. Okay, so what didn't I like? This game is hard. I have a tremendous amount of respect for speedrunners after this little foray into action gaming. I've seen records of around an hour and a half. I had no expectation of doing this, but I figured I could beat the game in an aggregate of 20 hours over the course of a couple weeks. It ended up taking me nearly triple that in over a month. Sure, this may just be my inability to play old games, sucking at lateral thinking, or just a general miasmic stupidity that occludes my capacity for basic human thought, but if I hadn't consulted a game guide, I would have roamed the world for hours, maybe longer. Like I said, this is an older game, but it's not like Link to the Past has one of those reputations for being some super hard Souls-like feat. My issue largely centered on the complete lack of exposition. Now, I enjoyed playing this game, much as I did Majora's Mask back in 1999, but I had help with that game. I used a copy of Nintendo Power Magazine, tips and tricks that were published in an edition of Electronic Gaming Monthly. and the official Nintendo tip line a couple of times. That's right, I called someone on the telephone, a landline telephone. Up to the end of the first dungeon in Link to the Past, Palace, I didn't need any help. My modern gamer sensibilities were thoroughly catered to. There was a location indicator on an open world map. No real further instructions were required for me. Just get there. That worked. I knew definitively where I needed to go. A couple of hints in the dungeon and I was set. After that, I was lost again. I'm not proud to admit this, but I only managed to solve 4 out of the 11 major dungeons without any help consulting a guide. And there was one that I basically followed line by line. I'm looking at you, Misery Mire. Man, that place was not fun. Now, this doesn't really amount to much of a criticism. I haven't been an action gamer in decades. I'm rusty, and this kind of game is way outside my comfort zone. And let's put this in perspective. If I had paid $50 to $60 for this game when it came out in the early 90s, the equivalent of like $120 today, I would want a good month's worth of entertainment out of it, at least. Why did this amount of time investment bug me? It's difficult to feel like the aimless nothing you end up achieving and failing to solve puzzles or knowing where to go in A Link to the Past actually works towards something. I love RPGs. At the very least, in a basic dungeon crawler, you come out of it with slightly higher stats, more in-game currency, or some nifty procedurally generated gear. All of this is missing from A Link to the Past, and that's by design. If you have max items and rupees, searching for the right direction and the objective of the dungeon or the correct solve to a puzzle is the only real pursuit. There is no, okay, I'm getting frustrated and tired of hyper-focusing, I'll go do something else for a while and come back. In this sense, the game also feels like the old-school 8-bit games of the previous generation. If you couldn't beat a boss in Shadow of the Ninja, you just restarted the game and slogged your way back to it. You could call this entertainment, but there's a flagellative quality to it. That being said, when you finally beat that boss, you feel pretty freaking awesome. I guess this amounts to where it hit me in the nostalgia. It quite literally takes me back to the early 90s when all I knew of gaming were the handful of NES games I owned. I didn't hate any of them, but I wasn't good at any of them because I was 6. Okay, moving on. Another minor and likely unpopular criticism. I didn't care much for the art style of the Dark World. It served its purpose well. It was a thematic counterpoint to the Light World, but it just wasn't my jam. It was Saturday morning cartoony and kind of cheesy. Alright, there are 3 questions I set out to answer in this series. Number 1, is the game fun? Absolutely. I do not consider even a moment I spent playing this game as a waste. I may have gotten frustrated, I may have gotten lost, but I loved playing it. Even if the style was not always my cup of tea, I had a blast beating this game. And even though I used guides, I felt that I really earned the victory. That final boss battle with Ganon, that took me quite a few attempts. Number 2, is the game a work of art? Without a doubt, yes. This game has stood the test of time not just because it's an excellent game. This game is certainly part of the cultural heritage of video gaming in general. From the music, to the graphics, to the game design itself, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past is a near-perfect representation of its medium. It's a time capsule of that early to mid-90s magic that was the Super Nintendo. And number 3, do I recommend the game? The answer should be pretty obvious at this point, but yes, absolutely. The advantage of playing a 30-year-old game that was originally mystifying to the point of fury is that there is now a myriad of free information available to help make it a more casual experience. Ultimately, if I could beat it, you probably could too. Thanks for watching today. That's one game off the bucket list.